Okay, welcome everybody to one of our first professional development webinars of the fall semester. And today we're going to be talking about OER. It's an OER grant webinar. So we have Z-Degree Collaborative and General Incentive Grants. And we have a person who's been a part of that, and they're going to talk about their experiences today. And so I think we're going to start off with our Z-Degrees. And then if you just want to put your questions in the chat, we'll make sure we have breaks for questions after each speaker.
Okay, well, I'm going to cover the Z-Degree grants, so I get to go first. Hi, I'm Emily Ragan. I'm from Metropolitan State University of Denver. So we're in downtown Denver on a tri-institutional campus that we share with CU Denver and the Community College of Denver. So because we have a tri-institutional library, our MSU Denver OER efforts have not come out of the library the way they do, I think, in many places, but have been, I guess you can say, faculty-led. I had the fortune of being on the 2017 inaugural State OER Council before there was even any grant money for institutions to write for. And I would say my OER journey really started 10 years ago when I worked with an instructional designer to develop an OER course for my general chemistry class. And we had 5 years where we had really what we would now call general grant support from the state of Colorado. From the first grant we wrote was in 2018. And so we had built kind of a community of faculty that had heard of OER. We had supported faculty in reviewing OER through open textbook review workshops, and the reviews were in the Open Education Network. We had led lots of faculty learning communities where faculty would attend a semester-long 7-session training. We had given out $750 OER adoption grants to a lot of faculty. So by the time the first opportunity to write a zero textbook cost grant came around, we had established a group of OER practitioners on campus. So I'm going to be really excited to hear what Christine has to say about their general grants, but that's definitely been a very important part of our process getting to where we're at now. MSU Denver has about 17,000 undergraduate students. We have about 58% first-gen students, 56% students of color. So we've got this really vibrant community downtown. And a lot of the faculty here at MSU Denver realize that course material costs are a large barrier for a large number of our students. And so there's been a lot of faculty motivation around cost savings. And then also, I think once faculty get involved in the work, there's a lot of motivation that's more intrinsic around enjoying teaching, enjoying the customizing of the content for the course. So let's see. So that's the background that I wanted to give mostly. The one thing I didn't mention is one of the first faculty learning communities that we led happened to be in chemistry. So I'm a professor in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry, and a colleague had pushed for us to standardize our general chemistry curricula. And we decided to adopt the OpenStax textbook across General Chemistry 1 and 2. And so we had some support for faculty when we were making that transition. And that happened early on in our OER journey. So when it came time to start thinking about zero textbook cost degrees, I was able to look at our OER landscape on campus, and I was able to recognize, actually, we've already made a lot of progress in chemistry. So those seeds that we planted with adopting OER in our first year general chemistry class had kind of expanded to faculty then adopting OER in other, say, upper division classes. And so I was able to say, look, here's a department where we've already made really good progress. Let's map out the steps that we need to take to move this forward. So we've been including the chemistry department in our Z-Degree grant proposals, and we came in with a really strong OER foundation that we've been building on. And as far as departmental required courses for the biochemistry major go, they are now all OER as of this year. So I'm really excited about that milestone. We had 4 other departments that got included in that first ZTC grant, and actually the second year ZTC grant that we wrote last year as well. So the next one I want to mention is communication studies. That's another department where there was kind of a foothold in first year courses adopting OER. And our COM 1010 and COM 1100 courses meet the general studies oral communication requirement, and like 77% of students meet that requirement with those courses. So they have incredibly large enrollment. So we had this early success in communication studies of adopting OER in these two courses that helped increase faculty awareness of OER. And so that's another department that we mapped out a plan and said, okay, how can we build on this success? And how can we move towards all of the core courses for a communication studies degree being OER? So that's a department that we've been focusing on. And then biology, we have a really active biology faculty member, John Dyer, who's going to be the chair, who is the chair of the OER Council this year. And as we were trying to map out how we could move toward ZTC, zero textbook cost degrees, general studies courses are really an important part of that, because obviously students have to take the general studies requirements. And so we kind of started in biology by focusing on some general studies courses, but then the goal has been, but then how eventually could we move the whole biology degree to be ZTC? So we've profiled biology. And then the School of Hospitality had not been on my radar, but there were several very enthusiastic faculty. And so when that call for proposals for the year 6 grants came out, I was able to start a collaboration with my colleagues over in the School of Hospitality. There's fewer existing OER in hospitality, and so there's been some really exciting creation projects that we worked on as part of our ZTC proposal. So the School of Hospitality came up with a 5-year plan and strategic classes to address different years. And so that's been part of our ZTC plans as well. And then another, so we've talked about chemistry, comm, biology, School of Hospitality. There was one more, department that we really profiled in these ZTC grants, and that was the School of Social Work. And one of the strengths social work had is they were very enthusiastic adopters of our no-cost and low-cost course marking initiative. And so they, the faculty in social work really embraced being able to mark their courses in those ways and had a large percentage of their courses already marked. And then they had adopted OER for social work 1050. So it's been fun partnering with faculty in that department to map out next step OER courses to also move both the social work undergraduate degree and eventually the social work master's program, trying to maximize the no cost for materials courses in those programs. So we've had 5 specific departments, or in the case of hospitality, a school that we've been working with to really make some major advances in those disciplines. And then the other prong of that first ZTC grant we submitted was focusing on other general studies courses where faculty were interested in adopting OER. And we're really lucky that the instructional design team at MSU Denver has been a really great partner in working with faculty to create high quality learning experiences while integrating OER. And they're specifically targeting online courses, but that also, benefits courses that are taught face-to-face. So, I hope that's helpful. If anyone has any questions at all or wants me to clarify, feel free to throw in the chat. Teaching during the pandemic, I got really good at reading the chat and talking at the same time. So anything you're thinking of, feel free just to throw that in the chat. I definitely have some advice for other institutions that are working towards ZTC degrees. So like I've been talking about, figure out where your strengths already are, where you already have momentum, and then you can strategically build on that momentum. So this is faculty who are already doing the work and want to do more, or faculty that are like that feel ready to start something now. Mapping out the degree is really helpful. So at MSU Denver, I can look at the course catalog and kind of look at these degree progressions, and we can identify, so what are the core courses for this degree? What would it take to make this course that every student is required to take OER? Like, who teaches those sections? So working with department chairs, other key faculty, and then looking at the course catalog has helped us map things out. So at least at a four-year institution, this is not, and I don't think any institution, this is not going to happen overnight. So I've told departments it's fine if it's going to take 5 years. And no, we can't ask for 5 years of funding. It's just 1 year at a time. But what we want to do is take a substantive step forward, and then we can see what we need to do next, and then keep taking those steps forward. So it's not going to be overnight, at least not at our institution, but we want to move forward. I really like OER adoption and general studies courses. That just has such an impact. They tend to be higher enrollment courses if you can get all sections of a general studies course, especially those high enrollment courses to adopt OER. You just have huge student cost savings. Like that is super powerful for impacting a large number of students. You do have to balance planning, having folks ready and excited for doing the work with some level of flexibility. We've sometimes had to switch out which course was going to be developed based on what faculty were teaching, what they had the bandwidth to work on that year. We've asked for money to support general studies courses and haven't had all of those courses identified yet, but we've been successful at being able to find faculty teaching general studies courses who want to get, it used to be $750, and now it's going to be $1,000 for an OER adoption grant. And again, we've been successful in working with the instructional design team. So some faculty that are getting those stipends aren't just going at it alone. They're having the support of an instructional designer along with them as they adopt the OER into their course. And we've also had sometimes, like I mentioned, you might have a faculty member that thought they were going to do one course, but there's another similarly important course that's actually more realistic for them to do. So we've had to have some flexibility in that way. One thing we learned last year is it's important at the state level that we standardize the dollar amounts across the different projects. And that was a little challenging because I've been working individually with faculty in social work, faculty in hospitality, and I've been trying to have similar amounts of money, but different departments might have different priorities. For example, social work faculty that were doing an OER creation project wanted to have not just faculty reviewers, but some student reviewers. So different departments might have different needs, different visions for how they're going to do work. But in general, you want to make sure that there's similar amounts of money going to similar sorts of projects. And so we had to kind of explain how really we did have similar amounts of money going to our projects, even though it was broken up in some slightly different ways when our year 7 ZTC grant was reviewed. Okay, so I'm going to adjust that question next. And just say one other piece of advice is you get the most bang for your buck with OER adoption projects. We've had those at $1,000, or OER adaption projects where there's an existing OER or maybe a couple OER that work well for the course, and the faculty member is just going to weave those together and maybe write some small sections themselves, but it's not a true creation project. Those projects, faculty can successfully complete in a semester and students can start benefiting from them relatively quickly. The creation projects seem to inevitably take longer than a year to happen. And we did just have a really beautiful set of general chemistry laboratory manuals come out. They're shared on Campus Commons now. They're going to be an OER Commons soon. And that's a project that we supported over 2 different years to get fully done. So creation projects tend to really energize faculty. They're excited about them. There's, these big potential, like beautiful products at the end, but they're really time consuming and a lot of work. So the more you can help your faculty adopt and adapt existing OER, you're just going to go further. So that's my personal opinion, or just an observation after having done this work for a while. And I do think the faculty training opportunities, the faculty learning communities, and we've added an online OER training class that I facilitate that's asynchronous, but faculty get $500 stipends for successfully completing an FLC or this OER training class. And I think that's really important. Faculty struggle to understand open licensing and how that impacts what they can do with materials, or if they're creating what license they want to put on them, or if they're adapting, how the licensing works with that. So I just think helping people understand the licensing is really huge. And so training is helpful for that, as well as to just create community. I think it's harder for me to quantify the creating community, but it's been a very powerful part of our OER growth at MSU Denver. Okay, so the question in the chat is, you said be flexible, but why writing the grant, how detailed and locked in does the implementation plan need to be? So I might say we're going to adopt OER in 12 general studies courses, and we've already identified, these 4, and we're going to identify the other 8 during, the funding period. And that's worked fine for us. We've always been able to complete the scope of work that we've promised. And in some ways, not saying exactly what general studies courses they are good, because you never know. Some faculty, move institutions or retire, or there's other shifts and changes that might happen. And so priorities might shift or availability might shift. So, Chelsea can also give her perspective about what people want to see. Certainly for larger projects, things like creation projects, I want to have a faculty member identified, have this larger buy-in. But especially when it's something more like an adoption grant, we've been able to not specify exactly which courses those would be. And we've been able to, especially through partnering with who's working with instructional designers, make sure all those spots got filled. Let's see, how do we evaluate success beyond computing savings amounts? And certainly the cost savings, I think, is really significant. We have just pulled a lot of data that was a little bit older because we're participating in a multi-site AAC, American Association of Colleges and Universities study, where they are controlling for instructors. So we pulled courses pre-OER and then post-OER for the same instructor. And we have looked, that's a very specific data set, and it was time consuming to gather. We don't have that for all of our OER course adoptions, but we're seeing higher student grades, higher numbers of A's, for example, in the students in the OER sections compared to the pre-OER sections. So student success is another metric. And I will say, with respect to the cost savings, students are either saving money or they now have access to the materials for the course that they wouldn't have had before. And students really are appreciating having the course materials available, ready to go in Canvas, no hoops to jump through. And so we did a student survey, and 89% of our students said that it was important or very important to them to have courses with no cost for materials. So there's a student stress level that's involved beyond even just the cost. But really, I think the easiest metrics have been to track, numbers of students impacted and estimating those cost savings. We do sometimes, I have a survey that faculty are welcome to give their students that gather some other more qualitative data.
And then I'm going to interrupt here and for the just paying attention to time. I think we'll pause on these next couple of questions and circle back at the end of the webinar, if that's okay with you, Emily.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, thanks,
okay.
guys.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's lots of interest in this for sure. So with this, we can transition to the collaborative grant.
Okay, I am going to go ahead and share my screen with you all. All right, let's see. Okay, I think that you're seeing let me click escape here for just a moment. Sorry, I think you're seeing the slide view rather than the presentation view. Stop my share, try again. Apologies. All right, there we go. Okay, so I'm talking about collaborative OER grants, specifically the GradCO program for advanced workforce readiness. I am Seth Velutich, the scholarly communications librarian at the Colorado School of Mines, and I will hop right into talking a little bit about GradCO here. So what is GradCO? It started in the pandemic. I think in 2020, a bunch of institutions were moving all of their professional development workshops online and decided, why not start sharing these? While these weren't recorded or saved, like it kind of fit the spirit of OER, I joined GradCO as the representative for Mines in 2022, early in the spring. And during, I think, the very first meeting, they were talking about needing some sort of persistent resources. And I was like, well, let's make them open resources, obviously, because that's kind of my sort of passion area. So we decided that we would start pursuing this over the course of several months in advance of the application. We met with Chelsea numerous times. I don't believe that there was a collaborative OER grant category at the time, and I think that we were sort of the first guinea pigs in this regard, but that gave us some flexibility and a little bit of like greater understanding of what it was that we could do. So we partnered 5 institutions, applied for $10,000 each. Haley Herman was the institutional PI at CU Boulder. She's a program manager for the graduate school. Bruce Mant at CU Anschutz, he is an associate dean of the graduate school, as was Christina at Colorado State University. I think she switched roles there fairly recently. And I think Cindy Wesley at the University of Northern Colorado, also an associate dean. So a bunch of associate deans, a couple of us, other folks who are working in like more supportive capacities. And we decided that we would develop 17 lessons specifically for online delivery aligned to the National Association of Colleges and Employers Framework for Career Readiness, develop a website and branding materials. And that's why we have these beautiful slides here, was as a result of this grant. So a lot of things went pretty well in this process. First, I think that we did a good job leveraging strengths, infrastructure, and partnerships, though we didn't initially plan to sort of break things out this way. We definitely ended up needing to have each institution sort of focus on an individual aspect of the project. I think we had initially sort of planned on, let's each individually develop our own content, edit it at our own institutions, like using our own infrastructure. We realized that that would be inconsistent and not great. So beyond that, we were also able to offer unique offerings. Mines and Anschutz, for example, are very STEM focused, whereas CU Boulder, CSU, and UNC are all more broad across the curriculum. So that allowed us to get some different perspectives. It allowed us to develop something that Mines could have never developed from UNC, like the culturally responsive qualitative research lesson. And I think that that went really well. Then we were also able to leverage some of these partnerships, like Coursera. CU Boulder has a strong partnership with Coursera. Some of you may be aware that they offer an online master's in electrical engineering that has a sort of unique pathway. They're doing that through Coursera. Then we were able to also use their sort of video editing expertise that's associated with Coursera. And I recorded my lessons at CU Boulder's campus, sent them off to their editing folks, and had them work away at it. Then we were also able to use the evaluation center, which is at the CU Denver campus, but CU Anschutz and Denver have a sort of unique relationship where they're kind of one campus and kind of two. And so we were able to leverage the evaluation center to develop an assessment metric for our course that we put together. We were also able to, in the course of developing the program, the support for, we were able to support graduate students. Sorry, got distracted by the chat. So we were able to support graduate student development in the course of developing our resources. I hired a web development fellow who developed our website for us. I think the website turned out beautifully. She was a recent graduate of a master's program at the University of Washington in St. Louis. I tried to hire locally, but that proved too difficult within our campus because of limitations on the amount of hours that graduate students can work. So I hired externally, but limited it to recent graduate students. And she used this, told me as we were concluding the project, she landed a job with TikTok and credited the work that she did on this project for helping her land that role. So even before the resources go live, we're having an impact on the graduate students. We also were able to have graduate students contribute to the course. Once again, that culturally responsive qualitative research methods lesson. Maria Lawman, who was putting that on from UNC, she hired one of her recent graduate students to participate in that particular lesson. And then with all of these things coming together, the course really turned out great. I think that it worked into a very cohesive whole. I worked through all the content fairly recently. We're in the process of review and publication with Coursera right now. So I think that it's a really, really good course. And I think that the graduate students will get a lot of benefit from this. Not everything went super smoothly. I think coordination could have been better. We were meeting once a month early on. We increased that to twice a month as the project progressed. Not everyone could make all the meetings. Emails got lost in folks' inboxes. I was trying to coordinate, but all of these different faculty members, I think probably like at various points, we've had maybe around 20 different individuals working on this project in individual capacities. And it becomes a little bit of a challenging conglomeration to try and group everyone's efforts together. And then time management was a little bit of an issue. Everything takes so much longer than you expect. I think a sort of good rule of thumb, having done some sort of more individual OER projects versus the collaborative ones, I think I would say take the number of institutional partners and multiply that by the time that you think it's going to take originally, and you probably get a little bit closer to the actual time. You might still end up short, but that was a little bit challenging. Also, spending money within a sort of tight time frame was harder than we thought it would be. It's a good problem to have money that you need to spend, but it's also a problem to have, no doubt. So early on, Bruce was like, we have all this money, like, let's use it for things that we can't do ourselves particularly well. So that's how we ended up, developing this GradCO logo and the slides. So I have some advice here for potential applicants as well. First, communicate early in the process and often throughout. It's super important for everyone to be on the same page as you're working through this content. Also, as much as I can communicate out, I need folks to communicate back with me. And so having this back and forth helps us improve the course. It helped us pivot as things were going. And that's sort of the next point, is that you need to be adaptable and willing to pivot. Changes happen, things come up. I think one person resigned from CSU who was planning to put on a lesson that made us have to pivot, and I ended up taking care of that lesson myself. Also divide responsibilities as best as possible. So each institution is having those responsibilities. If we had planned this earlier on, I think we would have run less into the sort of time management and money issues. And then finally, use resources wisely, right? You have like a sort of time and money balance here. So if there is something that you think is going to take an awful lot of time, but you have money to throw at that, that's a great way to use your grant funds. If you have something that you think is going to not take so much time, or there's pre-existing resources like Coursera, rather than developing our own website, which was something that I think we were planning on early on. It can help improve, I think, the end product, but also simultaneously make better use of resources. So that is all I have, and I will look in here and see if we have questions.
I don't know if there were specific questions in the
Yeah.
chat for this one, but we do have a few moments if anybody would like to unmute and ask Seth a question.
Seth, I actually would like to ask, how did you find your collaborators or what advice if you would give to others to find collaborators for a collaborative grant if they have an idea, maybe they don't already know those people?
Yeah, so I think that can be a little bit of a challenge. Mines participated in or is participating in a very large Department of Education grant. I think there are librarians at all of these different institutions. So if you're interested in a collaborative grant, reach out to the librarians at that institution and ask them if there are folks working in that area. That's how the Project Vector Department of Ed grant kind of worked out. I referred Susan Reynolds to the folks at CSU. So that is, I think, probably the easiest way to sort of gain some access to potential collaborators is just through the network that librarians or the PIs on these institutional grants are building. Beyond that, like in my case, it was just sort of serendipitous. We were all working on similar projects, sharing these remote professional development workshops. It made logical sense for us to develop something more persistent, and that worked out. I think if you're trying to make those connections, though, librarians or PIs on these institutional grants can be major assets. And then I see Victor asked if there was an official agreement between institutions or some sort of MOU. So we all applied together on the grant. So each of us had that as our sort of foundational agreement that we were going to produce these contents. And I think beyond that, it wasn't particularly necessary. GradCO itself has a charter, and we work off of that as a sort of independent organization from the institutions of higher education specifically, although we are each operating out of institutions of higher education. Any other questions?
Thank you very much, Seth. And we'll reserve a little bit of time at the end too for questions to all the speakers again. I think at this point, we will listen to information about the General Incentive Grant.
Hi, my name is Christine Gacetta-Sharp, and I am the OER coordinator at Pikes Peak State College. I'm going to try to share my screen of three different. Let me move this over. I have three different monitors, so I always get lost. Give me just a minute. Can you see my PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Let me go into okay, so it's not in present review, but that's okay. Just leave that as is. Okay, we're still good to see PowerPoint. Okay. All right, so we have incentive grant for specific projects is what we've worked on for the majority of the time that we've done the grant at Pikes Peak. We've been fortunate to have grant funds provided to us.
Can I interrupt briefly?
Yeah.
I think we're all just seeing a black screen.
Oh, okay. Let me stop sharing. Let me try this again.
Okay, that seems to work.
Okay, let me take this out of the way. Okay. Okay, and you can see everything now.
Yes, now it looks
Perfect.
good. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. All right, so Mark Nash was the original learning designer who started the OER grant with the college when it first came out through the CDHE in 2018, and we have applied successfully since then. He actually, I did not create the wheel for this. He actually was the individual who started the process. And so just some information about our institution. We have 3 different campuses, approximately 18,000 students based off of our 23-24 data book that is done each year. And we've had 6% growth this fall alone. We have 47% of our students are first generation, 50% of them receive financial aid, and 28% are Pell eligible, and about 2,500 transfer to 4-year universities. So when we look at the information for our classes and what we're doing as far as what we're looking for, I have another screen here, but our focus, just gonna jump and then I'll go back. Our focus are high enrollment courses, as Emily had mentioned, because we have so many students that transfer out, and we have so many students that are taking general education pathway courses. We look at and focus on those. We also look at courses that have high textbook costs, because we want to bring those costs down for our students. And then we also try to incorporate any newly developed classes or courses for programs that are either new developing programs or new classes that are being added to within the program. So before we take the actual approach of creating and writing our grant, we always start with the individuals that are going to be participating. So we're looking at gathering information on the courses that are going to be developed in the grant period. So we start by getting the word out early. We reach out to the division deans, associate deans, and chairs and ask if anybody's interested in developing OER for our grant cycle. I keep a list of individuals that have contacted me before, or that have mentioned OER, or have asked questions about OER, any OER related topics. I keep a list of those individuals, and I'll reach out to them directly as we're starting up the process. And then we also will target specific classes. So again, anything that is currently high enrollment that's not using OER, anything GT pathway related, or any other type of gen ed class that it's going to be transfer. We'll go ahead and I'll reach out to them directly. And then I also hold workshops through our CEDL team on campus, usually announcing the upcoming grant cycle, explain and some information about OER for those who don't know, and how it can be implemented, and then the process that we'll go through with the development of the grants. So after we've identified interest of anybody, I reach out personally. There's a lot of personal outreach that comes from me to the individuals that are working on grants to determine what type of work they're interested in doing, gather information about the textbook that they're using currently, because that will be used when we gather the data and present that for our grant. And then I contact our IR department to get enrollment information for the previous year. So once we've identified who's going to be working on the grant and the scope of the work that they're doing, we take all of this information and I put it into a table for our grant when we write it. So you can see this was from OER cohort 5, the classes that were identified. The textbook costs are listed there. We have the total enrollment numbers for the courses, potential savings for the individual classes, the type of work that they're going to be doing, and then any notes. And I found it's very important for me to keep notes on there because things will change and I need to make sure that I'm tracking what's happening. So we always will include the potential savings for that grant cycle, and then the number of students that are going to be affected. For this particular grant project, we estimated 290 students would would be impacted and benefit from the OER grant. So we always make sure to include that specific information. Some of the other things that we've just, when we're working on the grant writing process itself, I'm always just making sure that we're following the instructions carefully. Everything is laid out in the grant. We just need to make sure that we're addressing specifically the information that's requested from us. So being specific in answering the questions, providing specific information, providing data that's supporting our request and the reason why. We always request a letter of support from our president and VP of Instructional Services. Thankfully, both of those individuals are very supportive of OER since we're doing all of this within the scope of PPSC. We don't generally get outside letters of support, but if need be, we would request maybe outside from the Colorado system, since we are part of the system and 13 community colleges. But right now that's what we've used. And again, be just specific in the request as you're writing it. The one thing that I want to mention, and the reason why we want to be specific as possible, is not only for the grant itself, it answers any questions so the committee doesn't have to come back and really ask us anything or need to clarify anything. But committee members do change occasionally. And so as you, the individual who's writing a grant might, and I've done this, actually did this within our last grant cycle, with the request. Well, they know because they're familiar with us because we just went ahead and submitted our grant last year. But really think about approaching your grant writing as this is the first time somebody on the committee is seeing this grant information. So we want it presented in a way that is going to best reflect and accurately reflect our information. And we want to answer as many questions proactively rather than having to have them come back and ask us questions. So the benefits I feel of writing a grant this way are we know exactly how much money to ask for and who's going to be performing the work. That makes it very easy. I don't have to guess who's going to be filling in the spots after. So I do like that information. Writing the grant this way, I also rarely have to turn anybody away because we've already identified the courses and the information is tailored for the specific courses that we're going to be including in the grant cycle. Since everything is clearly outlined, it's very easy for us to follow timelines. I rarely have any issues about the work getting completed on time. So that has been a bonus for us. And we can start building relationships early and provide support. So once we know and we've reached out, we can start the process of relationship building if it's with somebody that I haven't worked with before. And that's going to be important as we go through, especially near the end, since a lot of this work is done during the semester. There's usually that crunch that the individuals feel at some point, typically near the end, but the better that we can build those relationships to begin with, the easier the process is going to be for everybody. And with the integration of Colorado Online, since we belong to this consortium of 13 colleges, we have the ability to use more of our developed materials at PPSC in the Colorado Online system. So we have 4 textbooks, 4 or 5 humanities, several humanities textbooks, and a philosophy textbook that currently have been adopted by the state discipline chairs in the Colorado system. So our OERs are now being used throughout the state of Colorado in the system and not just purely for our students here. The other benefit of the Colorado Online system is that the state discipline chairs will often adopt any OER, which can be very frustrating for somebody who hasn't worked with OER. But since we have a lot of books, we have approximately 86 books and courses that have been developed using OER now over since the beginning of the grant. They can just step in when we have a pooled course that's a Colorado Online course that's being taught at PPSC. We can just use our already built resources for the OER, and our instructors aren't scrambling to try to find resources. Some of the challenges that we experience, almost inevitably, somebody is going to back out of the original grant. I have not had an instance yet where that hasn't happened. It happens because faculty change, as Emily had mentioned the same thing. Time limits change, you know, there's time restraints that change, things like that always occur. So it's important to have a backup list and other individuals that you can reach out to so we can replace those funds, because we have already allotted them at the beginning. So we need to make sure that we're able to replenish those. On my end, it's very challenging for me to estimate fringe benefits. And there have been times as I've gotten into the grant where I like, it almost is like splitting hairs. It's fine for me to develop the estimates for the work that we're doing. Generally, we pay 100 hours worth of work development on our non-instructional rate, which is $35 an hour for most projects, especially if we're adopting or adapting new OER. But in an instance where maybe we have somebody who needs to just refresh or update an OER that had been previously created, then we might allot 50 hours for that. But our faculty and our part-time instructors are paid at two different, the fringe benefits percentages are different. So that has presented some challenges for us at times. In order to allot the greatest amount of time for somebody to create the work, the way that our SPFs and our contracts are written, I have to develop them over the span of semesters. And if somebody, for example, we had an instance where somebody had backed out of work, our financial services department didn't cancel that second contract. They only canceled the one term. So that's something that can be a challenge if we're not paying close attention. We've had a lot of change, like I'm sure many other institutions have. And so change fatigue has set in and pretty much plateaued at this point. So unless somebody is very willing and interested in adopting OER and they've really leaned into it, it can be challenging for us to find faculty and instructors who have the time and are willing to do the additional work of creating OER. We don't have individuals that get, they're paid separately. We don't have them reduce hours to be able to take on this work. And of course, inclusive access and publisher materials make adoption for faculty. It's very appealing for them. So of course, selling OER and getting everybody to recognize the benefits can be a challenge, but usually for those that are interested, it's very easy to overcome once we start those discussions. So that building of relationships is extremely important. I just have two more slides here. So some of our accesses, we've been fortunate again to receive the grant funds since its inception. We currently have close to 20,000 students a semester that are using, or throughout the year that are using textbooks. I have to make that correction. We've been able to save students over $7.5 million in textbooks costs since the beginning. So even though it doesn't seem at the, you know, with the 1 year, you know, we've saved $20,000, which in itself is, I think, a very good success. It adds up. So cumulatively, we're still saving money. We've again adopted across books across all 13 colleges. We have several, if not, I'm currently investigating this, but ZTC degrees. It's not something that we've been very good at tracking, so that's my focus going forward. And we do have a self-paced training that's available through the CCCS system that was developed as some additional money was left over. So I was able to take some of that funding at 1 year and create that training. And where we're going, so we are focusing on ZTC pathways going forward. We've created a new initiative where our marketing department has recently created materials to help students identify OER at the point of registration. So that was just released the beginning of this in the spring. We're going to really be leaning into it. What I need to find out with this portion of this, since it was developed recently I need it to be OER. I need for somebody else to be able to take this. Right now it's very branded to our school and I want it to be available to everybody. So we're really leaning into data and working on sharing OER materials throughout the state. And some advice, make sure that you start your planning and outreach process early. Have a backup if you're doing this so that as somebody backs out, you can have another person fill in. Really lean into your OER advocates and the relationships you've built on campus to continue to build and communicate often and be a source of support for your grantees so they don't feel like they're in the process alone. We really want to offer them support and that helps. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. We can take any questions for Christine with the general incentive grants or anybody else that would like to unmute and ask a question. That was a good time to do that. Just want to say thank you to the speakers. This is all really inspiring. Like it feels good to hear about this and get ideas from it. So thank you very much. I was going to ask Emily, you mentioned a survey that you provide for the faculty to give to students. What are you collecting? What's the information on that survey?
So we're asking the students about their experience with the course materials in that class and maybe how it's compared to course materials in other classes. There's some questions about cost and how that impacts students.
Okay. Would you feel comfortable sharing that?
Yeah, I have it in Qualtrics. So
Okay.
I don't know the best strategy for sharing, but yes, I certainly could share.
Okay. If you could email it to Chelsea, then she could send it out to the participants. I think people would be interested to see, because I think it is important to track what's happening, right? And sometimes it's hard to know what questions are important to ask until you're well into it. And then you're like, oh, that would have been good.
Yeah, it's always nice to have a starting place to not have to start from scratch. Yeah, I'm sure I can have like a PDF version that people can at least see.
Thank you.
And then I don't know if Victor feels like his questions have been adequately answered. Victor, did you have any other questions? Okay, that's great.
And anybody else, if you have any questions, go ahead and unmute or put them in the chat. Make sure that we get those answered in the last 6 or so minutes that we have.
Has anyone else on this call gotten a grant and have any advice that they want to share?
Or is anybody thinking about applying for one? Yeah, that's exciting.
I will say this about the grants, like they are some of like the lowest stress grants I think that you can apply for. Chelsea does a great job of trying to distribute funding equitably to all eligible projects, and so I think it's easy to work with her.
And then for our speakers, did you, when you were writing your grant, did you go to the office hours that they offer, or did you get feedback individually from Chelsea or somebody else on the committee?
So especially for the GradCO grant, I think it was necessary to get some feedback from Chelsea because we weren't entirely sure if it was even an appropriate fit. Despite like our desire to create OER, like there aren't necessarily cost savings associated with this, although some professional development programs cost a fair bit of money. So that was necessary early on. As far as like the institutional grants, Minds has participated since the beginning. And so I feel like we're relatively familiar with what's wanted from us. And so largely have been able to get by without the individual meetings. But certainly if I have any questions, I don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, and then Chelsea put the information in the chat. So you have questions or want to walk through anything, I think that's where you're going to send them.
And I just want to echo what Christine said, just read that request for proposals really carefully and provide everything that the state would like, and just try to explain it as clearly as possible.
And then did you just go by the rubric then? Because I know that a rubric's part of this, right? And so how did you apply the rubric to your grant?
I mean, you're right. Like, look at not just the RFP, but also the rubric, and make sure the way you're presenting the information really fits with what's being asked for. I was lucky in that I was able, the first few years of these grants, be on the grant review. And so, of course, I didn't review my own grant, but I was able to review other grants in the state. So that experience, probably has helped shape what I do. So people can always nominate themselves to be on the State OER Council. I think there's going to be some openings coming up in the future, and that's another cool thing to do if you have the opportunity.
Yeah, and I would second that. The rubric it makes it very easy. It outlines all of the steps that you need to follow. So as long as you're doing that and answering the questions, and again, this being specific and clear in what you're stating will carry you a long way in the process.
Yes, and Victor says to start the process early, and it is important to have data. You can sometimes find data yourself on the course schedules, or at least kind of guesstimate maybe what enrollment might be for some courses. But figuring out how to work with your institutional data team is going to take you a long way, and that's something that I've been growing into. In each year, I kind of get new reports created for me, and there's data is a huge frontier, and so leaning into that and embracing the people who are the data experts on campus is another good thing to do.
Well, we are at time, so I want to say thank you once again to our speakers. This is exciting, and I think it's inspirational for the people that are listening to this and wanting to get their ideas on paper and get that turned in by September 15th, right? So thank you once again, and thank you everybody who's in the audience. Appreciate your attention today.